I am a master's student at SFU. I'm researching in the field of maternal infant health, and my project is specifically examining gestational chemical mixtures and their impacts on neurodevelopment in children. And what drew me to this project was actually the cohort study that I'm working with right now. It's called the Maternal Infant Research on Environmental Chemical Study. It's this longitudinal cohort study that's been going on for over a decade now. And I found it so interesting when I was first looking for topics for my research, because there's just a massive amount of data to work with, and there's so many really cool directions you can take it in. They took these 2,000 pregnant women from across the country. They studied hundreds of chemicals from during their pregnancy that they were exposed to every day using all these different biomarkers. And they've been tracking the mothers and the children ever since to see how these chemicals affect different health outcomes in both the mother and the child. So my area is looking at neurodevelopment, but I'm also having a lot of fun watching all of the other research happen at the same time in all these other fields. The children are actually about to hit puberty pretty soon, so we're going to get a whole new wave of data. And it's really interesting to me. I'm a very quantitatively minded person. I like math, I like statistics. That's what made me want to go into epidemiology in the first place. So this kind of project with all of this data that I get to play with was just very exciting for me. I'm looking at chemical mixtures, so I've got kind of a lot on my plate for my project. I'm looking at heavy metals, I'm looking at phthalates, I'm looking at PCBs and pesticides and smoking metabolites, and trying to see how they all kind of interact with one another to cause these neurological, problems. In the gestational period in general, there's a bunch of huge cohort studies on this. It's such an important time for so many health outcomes. Like what you're exposed to, while you are a fetus can affect your health for the rest of your life. And this is particularly the case for neurodevelopment because you and I, we're exposed to hundreds of chemicals every day, and our bodies, for the most part, have a way to deal with those chemicals. We can metabolize them, we can protect ourselves from the negative effects. But a fetus doesn't necessarily have that ability. It doesn't have the structures in place yet. A fetus doesn't have a blood-brain barrier that's fully formed, so the chemicals can get right in there and have really devastating effects. They don't have the enzymes necessary to metabolize and remove chemicals. So if you want to study the effects of chemical exposures on neurodevelopment, the gestational period really is the best time to look into that. Women's health and my field is kind of sexual reproductive health as well as environmental epidemiology. And these are fields that I consider to be absolutely so important to the overall health of the community, and actually just an excellent way to gauge how well a community and a healthcare system is doing at taking care of its members. Because, during pregnancy, new mothers, infants, these are the groups that require so much care, but the research is so underrepresented, it's so underfunded, it is so difficult sometimes to get people to take sexual and reproductive health seriously within academia, but also in the general population. So I consider studies and research in this field to be so important, not just because it's important to study, but because we are making up for lost time at this point. Because historically, study about women, studies by women or for women were just not as common and not taken nearly as seriously as studies for the general population. Well, a lot of what I'm doing is focusing on how we research these things. And a lot of what I'm doing is very methodological. I'm focusing a lot on the statistics because that is my area. But one of the things that we do is when we are studying environmental epi is we tend to place a lot of emphasis on single chemicals. As I mentioned earlier, I'm looking at mixtures, but so much of the research we've done so far is on single chemicals. And pregnant women especially, and I hear complaints about this from new mothers a lot. They'll talk about, they say every 5 minutes there's a new thing I'm supposed to be scared of. There's this is that dangerous, that is dangerous. And it really worries them, but we're focusing so much on these individual chemicals, lead or mercury are the really obvious ones that we know we're not supposed to be exposed to during pregnancy, that we are completely missing the danger that is these chemical mixtures, the interactions, how they can affect each other together. And so I hope to kind of change the way we shift the focus away from individual chemicals, shift it towards kind of these mixtures, which are honestly more important to our daily lives because we're not exposed to one chemical at a time, and which are potentially more dangerous. So what we're doing is actually kind of a new method to environmental epidemiology, which is why I have so much fun with it and why I think it's so fun to talk about. It's called latent profile analysis, and it's a clustering method, basically. So what we do is we take all of our mothers, our participants in the study, and we actually feed them into the computer, basically. There's a lot of magic that happens, but we feed their information for the 30 chemicals that we're looking at into the computer, and the computer finds patterns in their exposure levels, and we separate the mothers into groups. So in my project, the computer found a group that had high levels of smoking chemicals, but there were also, there was a group that had high levels of a certain class of pesticides, but low levels of everything else. And a group that had high levels of absolutely everything, and a group that had low levels of absolutely everything. And it was really interesting because these are the kinds of patterns that, my dumb human brain probably couldn't just see by looking at the 600 different mothers that I'm working with, but the computer can find these patterns. And then what you do is you find the effects of the groups on the neurodevelopment. So how dangerous is it to be in a group that has this combination? And they're combinations that we actually see because, we were able to find them with the computer. So it's not looking at every possible interaction between every chemical, but just the most relevant combinations of the 30 chemicals. We always hope that our research is going to be helpful for the participants in our research. We always want, the end goal of healthcare research is to benefit the communities that we are researching. And even with my project, which is so methodological, which is so focused on how we research and the methods we use, I'm still trying to draw attention towards an area of research that is so often undervalued, and that is sexual and reproductive health. So I'm hoping that with my project, I'm able to, because the project is so centered on women and so centered on pregnant mothers, I'm hoping I'm able to help people see the importance of this as a very important time for overall health for everybody, for women, but also, everybody was exposed to something as a fetus. This is a very important area of study for society at large. So I'm hoping that I'm able to draw attention to that and do justice to it. I really hope that I am able to be helpful with this. I'm hopeful that I'm able to apply my overall skills as a math person in this more kind of social setting, in this more healthcare related setting. This is an area that I feel so passionate about, and I'm really excited to keep working on it in the future.